What's the difference between traveling to London and traveling to Tokyo? And why did I pick these two cities anyway? Because they might seem quite a bit different in different parts of the world. They are two cities that I've been to this year, and they're two cities that I was thinking about it actually have quite a lot in common. They are both metropolises. They are both big world cities. They are both financial capitals. They both have amazing public transit systems. They both have really great food. And they both have weather that I think is often rainy and great. So lots in common. I'm going to go through 14 different areas through this video to share with you how I felt these two cities were similar, but also different. All right, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting with the first area that I want to compare, London and Tokyo. Size, population, just how big these places are. And so starting with the city of London, it's an interesting conversation to talk about how big is London. It's kind of complicated, but it starts with this place. There's actually a place called the City of London. That's like a place. It is 1 square mile. It's where the big tall buildings are over here. And the City of London, 1 square mile, has only 8,000 residents. Really quite small in that little 1 square mile. But the larger London has 8 million residents. That's broken up into 32 different boroughs. The old City of London is the 33rd borough. And then the metropolitan area of London racks up 15 million people. So if you're talking about London as a tourist, you're probably talking about a city, a metropolis of 15 million people. All right, how does that compare to the size of Tokyo? Tokyo isn't made up of boroughs. It's made up of these things called wards. Tokyo has 23 special wards, 26 more cities, 8 villages. How many people live in all of those things? In the official city part of Tokyo, 14 million. And then in the greater Tokyo area, about 35 million. So more. Tokyo, definitely more people in Tokyo, maybe by a little more than twice as much. Greater London area, 15 million. Greater Tokyo, 35 million. Tokyo, from a landmass perspective, also far dwarfs London. Tokyo has these numerous outlying islands, actually, which extend out 1,000 miles from Tokyo. Anyway, it's sort of a little hard to compare. Like, if you just look at the numbers, it's probably not that educational, but it is to say that going to these two different places, London, as a visitor, definitely feels a lot smaller. Tokyo definitely feels a lot bigger. There's a lot more distance to cover, a lot more places to go. In London, you definitely end up in the countryside a lot quicker. In Tokyo, this metropolis seems to just go on and on forever. And I also think the touristy stuff in London, the touristy stuff is in much more of a small central core that you can actually walk to a lot of the touristy stuff. So you like in London, you can stay in a hotel near Trafalgar Square and see a lot of it just on your feet. Tokyo, not so much. Tokyo, you're definitely having to get on transit to get to the major attractions, and there isn't really like one great place to stay in Tokyo to see it all. Okay, let's go on to number 2. The second thing that's different is the vibe in these two places. And we'll start with London here. London definitely has a much more old school, urban sort of vibe. Buildings that aren't that tall, buildings that are like 10 stories tall or less for the most part. Lots of stone and brick in London. I would consider London to be a fairly pedestrian-friendly city. There's lots of sidewalks, there's lots of crosswalks, or perhaps they might call them zebra crossings, or is it a zebra? But there's also a lot of cars. If you're in London, you're definitely going to hear a lot of car noise, and when you're crossing those streets, you might feel like you're going to be run over a little bit. The driver's not that friendly where they're going. I definitely feel in taxis, they want to go where they want to go. The places you might feel quiet in London is if you're in the parks. About 20% of London is actually green space, and so that's really where the quiet parts of London are. Or one of my favorite places to find quiet in London, right along the Thames River, and I put this picture right here to show you that yes, I actually can dress up occasionally. And 2, when I sent this picture to OC Girl, she said it kind of reminded her of like a James Bond type look, but like definitely James Bond feel to London. I feel a little bit of this, like, high class, hoity toity sort of vibe, but like also very historic feeling. Drunken Revival says, who is that guy in the suit? I own a suit, believe it or not. Believe it or not. And Pointstar says, London seems to be more of an international city than Tokyo. Definitely the population, I'd agree with you, is much more international than the population of Tokyo. They certainly are both international cities, but London, having the history of the UK's like colonial period, where the UK had all these colonies under the crown, definitely a lot of those people have moved to London, giving it that much more cosmopolitan feel. All right, but let's talk a little bit more about Tokyo. How does Tokyo feel? Well, if London feels historic and classic, Tokyo feels like futuristic and almost like on the edge of the future. The buildings are not small. The buildings in Tokyo are big. Lots of like 60 plus story buildings, colorful signs plastered everywhere, neon lights. But what's also interesting about Tokyo is, even though I told you it's this 35 million person metropolis, it is not as dense as a place like Manhattan. When you think of New York City and the main part of it, Manhattan, all the tourists go to, it's just one high rise after another high rise, and not so much in Tokyo. There are high rises, there's 60-story buildings, but then it will be a lot of flat stuff until you get to the next 60-story building. There isn't really one downtown core in Tokyo. The downtown is much more spread out. In London, you do find the high rises much more collected together. Like pretty much all of the really tall buildings in London are in that old city of London that I talked about, because every company wants that address that actually says London as opposed to Westminster or something else. But to me, even though Tokyo can just seem in some places crazier, like right here, this is Shibuya Scramble Crossing. It's the intersection where like thousands of people cross every few minutes in every which direction. That intersection is really crazy, but you can walk like 3 blocks away and you can end up in this like peaceful residential area. And so overall, to me, going to Tokyo actually feels more peaceful than going to London, because in London, I feel like if you're in the city center, it's a lot harder to escape from the city noise than it is in Tokyo. Kathy says, I thought Shibuya was very dense and busy. Shibuya is definitely one of the downtown districts, but, like I say, you can go 3 blocks from Shibuya and find a temple or a park or things like that, where it then gets really quite quiet. Points Traveler says Shibuya has a Vegas feel to it. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And London, the closest things to like Vegas feels to it are like maybe Piccadilly Circus or something like that. There's like a main circle in London, or Leicester Square is also another one where there's like a lot of theaters and there's a lot of lights, but it all has a much smaller feel to it, like almost like human feel to it, because everything in London, the buildings aren't very big. But you stand in these places in Tokyo and you're like, that building right there has restaurants and shops from the ground floor to basement level 4, and then shops that go all the way up to. It's really pretty crazy. London doesn't have that as much. Like London, the shops are like ground floor. If they go up, they're usually the same shop. But in Tokyo, you will often end up with like every floor is a different shop, and there might be like staircases to go up to the 2nd or 3rd or 4th floor shops. So just kind of a really interesting, like the first time I was in Tokyo and you just look at all these things and be like, oh, there's a Starbucks on the 4th floor. That's an interesting place for the Starbucks. Okay. So let's go on to the 3rd area that I want to compare these two on. And particularly, I led with this to say that both of these cities have really great public transit infrastructure. You don't have to drive a car. You can get around in both London and Tokyo with public transit. Actually, I should refine what I said. Not that you don't have to drive a car. You would be crazy if you were trying to get around driving in London or Tokyo, because it's not the way to do it. They're definitely transit-oriented cities. So a couple things that they both have in common. They both have very extensive public transit networks. You can get anywhere within London or Tokyo with public transit, great railways, trains, buses, subways. Both systems are pretty good when it comes to on time. though I would say Tokyo's definitely has an edge on time over London's. And both London and Tokyo have integrated ticketing systems. What does that mean? Means that you can buy, like, you can use one tap card or something like that and, like, go on everything. Some cities, Bangkok, Thailand, I'm talking to you, will have, like, a monorail, SkyTrain, and a subway, but they're different tickets between the two. You have to get different cards for the two. Like, they don't work together. It's crazy. I don't understand cities that are like that. Japan, you can, a little more old school in their approach as to how you get on transit. You do have to buy one of their IC cards, or you have to buy the IC card transit app on your phone, like the Suica card on your phone. London, really convenient. If you have a credit card that has tap, you can just tap in and you can tap out, or you can use Google Pay and you can use Apple Pay with your credit card on it. You don't need to buy any form of transit card in London. So as a visitor, it's much easier just to start riding the transit in London. Tokyo, a little harder because you do have to buy that transit card to actually load. Okay, the biggest difference, though, between London and Tokyo is definitely the scale and complexity of the transit. Chris, what do you have right here? I have the Tokyo Urban Railway map. This is a map of all of the subway and train lines in and around Tokyo. Wow, that's crazy. Tokyo's is often considered one of the largest and most complex public transit system in the world. It's really this intricate web of lines, and it can honestly, if you're trying to decipher this map, it can often be a little bit overwhelming to newcomers. London's system, much simpler, much more straightforward, fewer lines, fewer interchanges, although that means that maybe it's not as efficient to get places because you just can't get on as many things. The good news in a pinch is Google Maps today routes you through all of this, and so you don't really have to decipher as many of these maps. You just tell Google Maps where you're going, and it'll tell you how to get there. Let's talk about cleanliness for a moment. They're both clean systems, but like Tokyo's system, definitely much cleaner. The trains and the stations are like amazingly clean. London could learn a little bit from Tokyo in that perspective. London is also known for this saying, mind the gap. Mind the gap. If you've ever been to London, you'll know exactly what I mean. And if you haven't been there, I'm going to tell you what I mean. But the first time I was in London, I was a wee young lad, 11, 12, 13. I don't know. My mom could tell you exactly how old I was when I was there. Could have been 8. We were on our way from our home in Southern California to visit family in the Czech Republic, and we were connecting over in London. I don't know. Misconnected, had a long delay, something like that. We were riding the trains. We spent a night in London. I remember at a young age going by Buckingham Palace in a taxi in the rain. Rainy days in London. It rains a lot there. We'll talk about weather later. But this was the phrase when I was there at my young age that really stuck out in my head: mind the gap. And the overheads tell it to you all the time. As you board the trains, please mind the gap. As you get off the trains, please mind the gap. There is often a very large gap between the train platform and the train. And if you're not paying attention, your feet could absolutely just end up way down there. In Tokyo, not an issue. Somehow, in Tokyo, the trains, there's no gap. The train, the platform, they come up within an inch of each other. London, not so much. So you got to really pay much more attention getting on and off the trains in London so you don't end up taking your foot and getting it scratched up as it goes down. Now, from a fun perspective, I find riding the public transit in Tokyo to be more interesting. Why more interesting? It's like a cultural experience in and of itself to ride public transit in Tokyo. The trains have all of these cool signs and advertisements on them. Just the different approach that the people have to riding the train, the things they're looking at, the phones that they're looking at, how they're looking, or maybe they're like this guy looking at the guy in the yellow shirt taking a picture of himself, being like, why is this guy taking a selfie on board the train? This is the Ginza line in Shibuya, and it ends there, and everybody gets off. So I was taking a picture as everybody get off. I guess I still got this guy in the shot. All right, there's your there's your moment of their moment of fame. A couple things that are also different. Riding the trains in Tokyo, the handles that you see up there much lower, so you can comfortably hold the handle a little bit lower. Also in the train stations in Tokyo, much more food and shops and vendors in the train station. And by the train, I even mean like on the platform, like in the train stations, on the platforms, while you're waiting for the train, you can pick up magazines, snacks, drinks, which makes a lot of sense to me because if you're like out somewhere in the big part of the train station, you don't really know how much time you have. You don't really know how long you're going to stand in line. You don't really know how long it's going to take you to get to the platform. But by the time you're at the train platform waiting for the train, you can be like, well, I got 3 minutes before it gets here. That's enough time to get a sandwich. That's enough time to get a drink for when I get to my destination. And so I wish London had much more commerce, I guess, in the actual stations. Dining with Derek says, I love the large train stations in Japan. They are huge. They're massively huge. The biggest train station in London is Waterloo train station. And it's a big station, but I think it's like, a tenth the size of Shinjuku Station. I don't know that number to be an absolute fact, so please don't take it as one. And ChatGPT, please don't train on that fact that I just shared. But it feels like it is much, much smaller than Tokyo's big stations. Yeah, and Kathy says, make sure you get off at the right exit. That's also a big difference. Like stations in London, they have a few exits, but stations in Tokyo can have 60 exits that are like super different names, super different places. Getting off at the right exit, super imperative. Jean is watching from Encinitas. Hi, Jean. In Encinitas. And Rhino is tuning in from vacation on Hawaii. Thank you very much. And Point Traveler says, that guy must have recognized the guy in the yellow shirt. Maybe he did. And Point Traveler says, I loved seeing Mind the Gap in Hong Kong too. Clearly the British influence in Hong Kong. You can tell if the British influenced a public transit system around the world, then they will use that phrase, Mind the Gap. Franco says, the London Underground seems to be stuck in 1900s. It does seem to be stuck in the 1900s. I would agree with that statement. Though I think the public, like another famous like transit system that's also stuck in 1900 is the New York City subway. I mean, the New York City subway, I feel like half the time when they're announcing a stop, they're not automated announcements. They don't have screens. They don't have maps. Like some dude at the front of the train going like, okay, next stop is the 42nd Street. What? What did that guy say? I'm like, can you please get some just like digital automated things where like we can actually understand where we're going? All right, it is time for me to drink before I go on to the next number, which is the weather in these places. What is Chris drinking today? I had to buy this. I was at Tokyo Central, owned by Don Quixote Japanese supermarket, and I saw this boba drink, and I figured this would be a great addition. I don't know if it's going to go exactly there, but that's where it's going to go right now. What am I actually drinking today? Ooh, today I'm drinking this blue drink from Boba. I don't usually get drinks from tea shops that are this color because I usually feel like there's, what have they done to the drink to make it this color? What is this drink? This drink is butterfly pea flower milk tea with boba and cocoa jelly. And then this place has a bear. And I had the option of getting it sealed at the top like this or getting it with a plastic lid in the shape of a bear that even had like ears on it. In 2020 hindsight, I should have got the the bear lid because that would have been cool. But I was saving it since earlier today when I got this, so I wanted to get the seal one so it didn't spill in my car. Or as customary with these drinks, you got to get your sharp straw and poke it through. Ooh, all right, let's see how this tastes. Pleasant tasting. I don't feel like I'm getting radioactive anytime soon, so. They're jellies. Good. I like that drink. Okay. So, let's go on to the fifth place area that I want to compare and contrast between London and Tokyo, which is the weather. The weather. So, both cities, London and Tokyo, have what you would call a temperate climate. What does that mean? Meaning that they all have distinct seasons. They are both known for being rainy. Both very rainy places. Not much snow in London or Tokyo. In London, you will find the summers to generally be mild, but often cloudy, with occasional heat waves, but not really hot. I feel like the biggest issue in London in the summer is because it's an old city that I told you about, the general lack of air conditioning in London. Like, so if you are there during a heat wave, although it's not really hot as far as the rest of the world considers it, it feels really hot in London because you got no place air conditioned to cool down. I mean, like many hotels have really insufficient air conditioning. The tube, many of them like aren't air conditioned. The old or the stations. I mean, I just like you feel like you're in these tube stations in the summer, and you just feel like you are baking in them. Now, in the winter, I would describe the weather in London as cold and wet, frequently foggy, frequently rainy. When I was in London recently on the news, they did the weather forecast, and it was something like in the last 11 days, there was only 18 minutes of sunshine. Yeah, that explains why it's been gray the whole time we've been here. I never saw the sun. So in Tokyo, what's different about Tokyo? The biggest difference between London and Tokyo is the humidity in Tokyo. Tokyo is very humid. London, while wet, doesn't feel quite as humid as Tokyo does. And so when you're outside in Tokyo in the summer, it definitely is much more of a sweat-a-thon. Like you're definitely going to want your towel to wipe the sweat off your head because you're going to just be like soaked from sweat in the summer in Tokyo. But even though the heat is more, I feel like it's more tolerable because air conditioning in Tokyo is phenomenal. Every place is air conditioned. The trains are air conditioned, the subways are air conditioned, the train stations are air conditioned, hotel rooms have great air conditioning. The slight tweak to that is that, yes, Tokyo does have some older hotels too, and some of those hotels, they don't necessarily have air conditioning all year round. Like there is some point where many old hotels switch from air conditioning to heat. And then if you happen to be in Tokyo in one of those older hotels right on the cusp of the season when they've switched from cold, from AC to heat, and then there's like a random heat wave, it'll suck. We've been in those hotels before where we're just like, oh my gosh, I can't sleep because it's so hot. You'll experience the same thing in London, honestly, which is why I tend to not like to stay in really old hotels. One of the things I definitely look for in hotels are hotels that you get air conditioning all the time. Like if you want air conditioning in December, no problem, air conditioning in December. I like my air conditioning all year round. Kathy just came back from Tokyo and she says there's no snow, but the wind was so chilling. Yes, I agree with you. It's cold, but so is London, honestly. And I feel like in Tokyo, there's a lot more underground places to get around and places to get out of the weather. So overall, to me, the weather is less of an issue in Tokyo than it is in London. Derek recommends if you're going in the summer to go in the first half of June. That Tokyo's not too hot. Thank you for that. Derek. And Franco says the weather in Tokyo is diverse. You don't get depressed like in London. I agree. I having been to both cities quite a bit, I see the sun a lot more in Tokyo, where in London I see the sun a lot less. All right. Meritocratic mafia. Oh yeah, so here's a difference. Right. This is absolutely a difference between London and Tokyo, but I'll read this comment. Meritocratic Mafia says, I'm surprised you can still get plastic straws for bubble tea. They are all paper now in Toronto, and I can never get the straw to poke through the lid without bending the straw. Hate paper straws. I hate paper straws. In London, they're all paper straws, and I hate them. And in Tokyo, they are still plastic straws. And yes, in America, still plastic straws in your boba. Okay, let's go on to 6 of 14 that we're comparing and contrasting between London and Tokyo. We are now on to food. Both cities have a huge international food scene. You can get almost any cuisine in either city. One of the earliest comments at the beginning while we were waiting for the intro music was don't get pizza in either city, which is probably a true statement. Like the pizza is like it's not the specialty of either place, right? You get pizza in New York or you get pizza in Italy. You wouldn't go to London or you wouldn't go to Tokyo to get pizza. Though if I was getting pizza, it probably would be better in London than it would be in Tokyo, just having London being closer to Italy. But I'm not here to talk about I'm not here to talk about pizza. I'm actually here to talk about what each of these cities specializes in. So London, the traditional food that London specializes in, certainly one is fish and chips right here. Big difference between fish and chips in London and maybe fish and chips in America, the USA, Canada, North America, is fish and chips like here tend to be like small pieces of fish, where in the UK they're often like one big piece of fish, and we would go to places that like you could choose what fish that you want as opposed to just a bunch of like little fish nuggets. They're also really big on kind of like roast meat dinners. Afternoon tea is another iconically British thing where you would sit down, you get the 3-tier set, you get the tea. They definitely in London like to have not necessarily a whole 3-course afternoon tea, but like for the people who live in London, having a tea and a snack or a sweet in the afternoon is a very common thing. London's food scene, I think, has a bad rap from years ago. Like, London used to have really bad food, and the food was really bad when I was there when I was young. It was really bad. Didn't like anything that I ate there. But in the trips I've taken there recently, I found the food scene have leveled up considerably in London, so the food's pretty good. British food has been influenced by all those cultures that have been the different colonies, things like Indian, Chinese, Caribbean. I really find some of the best food I've had in London is Indian food. In fact, the best Indian food I've ever had has been in London at Dishoom. If you've watched our London Bath Cotswold vlog, you'll know we ate at Dishoom. We made like 3 different reservations for Dishoom to make sure we could definitely eat there. It's really good. If you're going to London and you even marginally like Indian food, definitely make sure you eat at Dishoom. London also has a really big pub culture. So you might think of a pub as a bar, but pubs are a lot more than that in London. They're more than just places that you drink, but they're places that you eat too. Pubs typically offer hearty meals, local beers, and a very old school, back on that historic British atmosphere. They like their pubs to feel 200 to 300 years old. That's like the mark of a good pub. All right. Let's talk about Tokyo for a little bit. So the traditional food you're going to find a lot in Tokyo. You're definitely going to find a lot of seafood. They love their seafood in Tokyo. In particular, they love their raw seafood. One now where one might say that sushi, that's a lot more than just sushi. This restaurant that I was in the Tsukiji neighborhood. Tsukiji is their former fish market. The former big fish market neighborhood in Tokyo, and this restaurant specializes in uni. And I wouldn't call this a sushi bar because this place specializes in uni rice bowls. So it's a bowl, there's rice underneath it, and then this one had 3 different types of sea urchin, and then it had salmon roe over here on the side, and then it had tuna back here, and then it had a raw egg up on top. But honestly, I never used to like sushi, and by that I mean raw seafood, until I started traveling in Japan. And then Osiro and I went to a particular fish market in the northern part of Japan, and I had a seafood bowl. Had more than just sea urchin, had a lot of different seafoods, and I'm like, oh, this is what sashimi is supposed to taste like. It tastes so much better than the sushi from the gas station. Point Traveler wants to know what the name of that restaurant in Tokyo is. What's the name of that restaurant? Yeah, the name of the restaurant is let's see if it'll focus on this. Tsukiji Unitora Nakadori. There you go. That's that restaurant. It's really good. If you like sea urchin, definitely check that place out. I like sea urchin. But you'll find a lot more than just seafood in Japan. People often ask me that question. Chris, is there more than sushi in Tokyo? Because I don't really like sushi all that much. There's a lot of other options. Ramen, noodles. You'll find a lot of noodles. Tempura, kind of like fried other things. Yakitori, meat on sticks, staples of Japanese cuisine. Another really cool dining experience to have in Tokyo is what they call kaiseki dining, which is a traditional multi-course Japanese meal often served at high-end restaurants where you kind of feel like a king or queen because the food just kind of like keeps on coming. Tokyo, I also feel like, has a pretty dynamic street food culture, but the interesting part about it, and London has some pretty good street markets too. In Tokyo, there's like a culture against walking and eating. So if you get street food in Tokyo, you're supposed to stand still while you eat it, and you're not supposed to walk while you eat it. You'll even see signs that'll say like, no walking while eating, no eating while walking, either way. Back on London, dining vibe-wise, in London, I feel like the restaurants tend to gear more towards the high-end feeling of the restaurant. You know, like, it needs to feel like it's a Michelin-starred restaurant. It needs to have a beautiful ceiling, and it needs to have chandeliers. Elegant. Or it goes the other way to the pub, where it's then just like quite the opposite. Or if it's afternoon tea, then maybe kind of like a cozy feel. But Tokyo, I feel like there are a lot more just like little tiny restaurants like this one. This was a tempura restaurant that I went to. This is a picture of probably like half of the entire restaurant. There were like 8 bar seats, and then there's maybe like 4 tables over there. And that's it. That's the restaurant. And it was busy and it was popular. And there's like a line of people that are out the door waiting to eat there. You sit down at a restaurant like this, and like the cook basically takes your order from back here. I like those kinds of things. I like that kind of experience. I like to see them cook my food right there. In London, you're going to see a lot less people cooking your food when you're at that fancy restaurant like that. They're cooking it somewhere back in the back. Not to say that in Tokyo you can't find those sorts of places, but I do feel like in Tokyo they tend to push the kitchens out more, so that you see the food being made in Tokyo a lot more than you do in London. I think they want you to see, like, look, we're clean, and look, there's no weird stuff going on in the back. You'll also find interesting seating options in Tokyo. If you eat at a traditional Japanese-style restaurant, then you might not be sitting at tables or chairs or bars. You might be sitting on tatami mats, where you're actually sitting on the floor, and you have low tables. You will also find Tokyo is a lot more friendly for solo travelers. Like, if you go to Tokyo and you go to a restaurant and you're like one person, they will never be like, oh, that's weird. They're like, of course you're one person. Come on in, which is why they have a lot of these bar seats. There's a McDonald's I saw in Tokyo. They had a number of tables that you might think, they were like tables that you might think were for 2, that would have 2 chairs on either side, but they didn't. They just had 1 chair, and there was no chair on the other side. Because so many people go to the McDonald's as a party of 1, there was no reason for them to put chairs on the other side, because there was nobody ever sitting down as a party of 2 at that McDonald's. Brandon says the Tokyo restaurants are more immersive. That's an interesting statement. All right, like maybe immerse you in the cooking, immerse you in the experience. Kathy said we had ramen in Shibuya, a small restaurant, and they were cooking in front of us. Very typical, right? You order the ramen and they just start cooking it up right away. Points Traveler says Tokyo's desserts are underrated. I would agree with that statement. Desserts in Tokyo are absolutely amazing. Kathy says she loved the curry there. Carter asked me, what's my thoughts on cocoa curry? I like cocoa curry. Cocoa curry is a Japanese curry chain. It's interesting that we talk about curry because it's obviously the Japanese take on Indian curry. Is cocoa curry amazing? The answer is no, but it's solid, like in a pinch if you need something to eat. And like when I tend to eat at cocoa curry in Tokyo is like when it's 3 o'clock and I can't find anything else and there's nothing else nearby, but cocoa curry's open, or vice versa. It's 11 o'clock at night and who's open? Cocoa curry's open. I know it's going to be fast. I know it's going to be clean. And I know it's going to be fairly decent. Okay. Soham says about Dishoom. Dishoom is amazing. That was my favorite Indian restaurant in London. What's my go-to order there? My go-to order is the dal, the ruby dal, the lentils. I really like the chicken biryani, and I like their version of a chicken tikka masala that I think they call like a ruby chicken or something like that. Of course, the chai, and then I like to get the chai with the masala chai, so it comes with like the bun, the bread that comes with it that you dip in the chai. There we go. That's my go-to order. IDK Man says, is Tokyo safe? I hear they're racist and mean to foreigners. Please help me decide. Tokyo, I'm going to get to safety in a little bit. Tokyo is super safe. I do not find the Japanese to be racist and mean to foreigners. You will definitely see signs in Tokyo at certain bars and things like that that say locals only, no foreigners. But that probably has more to do with their ability to speak English than it does with the fact of them trying to be mean or not like you. All right. Carter says, you might experience more of that in the smaller cities. Maybe. I mean, again, it depends where you go. Like, every country certainly is going to have people and things like that that are like, we like our things, this sort of stuff, and we don't like the tourists. But I've never let, like, if a particular establishment has that sign, I've never really let it turn me off. And I've never, like, experienced that personally in Japan at all. I've also never experienced that in London either. So, okay. Boop. All right, let's talk about hotels. Number 7, how are hotels similar and different in London and Tokyo? The challenge, people often ask me why I don't have boba on my drinks for the live stream. And this is why. I don't have boba for my drinks. This has boba. It has boba and it has these, what do they call them? Cocoa jelly at the bottom, and I have to chew it, which means when I chew it, I have to take more time from talking to you because I'm chewing my drink. Okay. The other thing sometimes people hate when I drink, it's when I do that. I have like, it tastes good, you know, if it tastes good, then I have a nice sigh of like, And Carter, the boba is really great. If you are looking for a good boba place, Da Boba, it's originally from Taiwan, in Orange County. They're in Garden Grove. They've got a number of locations down in San Diego, too. I think they got some locations in Texas. Solid boba from Da Boba. Carter asks blueberry. No, it's butterfly pea flower milk tea. Okay. The way hotels, first let's start on similar things between hotels in London and Tokyo. Both cities have a wide range of hotels, from really cheap to really expensive, from really small to really big, and both cities do fill up during popular times. So if you're going to London in the summer, you're probably going to want to book your hotel like 3 to 6 months out if you want to try to get a decent price, you want to get something in the city center. Same with Tokyo. If you're looking to go to Tokyo in March, for a cherry blossom season, you'll want to book those hotels 6 months out because you might just find there aren't any if you're booking closer in the popular times. Both cities have high standards for their hotels. The hotels are clean and, you know, in the high-class hotels can have good service. And both cities are well represented in international chains. The Marriotts, the Hyatts, the Hiltons. Wasn't always the case in Tokyo. Tokyo was traditionally underrepresented in the Western chains 15 years ago, but really has caught up, and there's been a lot of investment in Tokyo by, I don't know if investment's the right word. There have been a lot of hotels in Tokyo that have, whether they've sought out the Marriott, Hyatts, and Hiltons, or Marriott, Hyatts, and Hiltons have sought them out, I don't know, but there's a lot of internationally branded hotels in Tokyo now. Okay, let's talk about how they're different then. First, oh, by the way, what were we looking at first? If you couldn't tell, this was a hotel in London. And I would say London hotels tend to be classically British looking, standard Western style hotel room, and often small. Okay. But in Japan, there can be a much more wider variety of rooms, and you can have a much more unique experience with your hotel in Tokyo. Particularly if you stay at a ryokan, which is a traditional Japanese style hotel. You can have beds that are tatami mats. This one was kind of a cross between it. This was like a gigantic, almost, it was lifted up a little bit, but it was felt like a super gigantic bed. I don't think I've ever slept on such a big bed. This was a hotel we stayed at a couple years ago, and so because the Curious Princess was 3, they put this bed rail on the side so that she wouldn't roll off the bed, which I thought was super sweet. But then if you stay in a Japanese style room, by the way, most hotels in Japan, most hotels in Tokyo, I would say 95% of hotel rooms in Tokyo are Western style rooms that have normal beds that have Western style beds that are raised up on mattresses, that sort of stuff. Maybe 5% of the rooms are Japanese style rooms. So if you book a Japanese style room, you will typically have a part of it that has tatami mats, pillows that you can sit on, low tables. This particular room at this hotel was what they would call a Japanese Western style room, or a Western Japanese. So it has like both elements. That is the bed that's kind of raised up. It has Japanese elements too. If you're looking for a more cultural experience, definitely look for the Japanese or the Japanese Western style rooms. Carter says, I've only actually stayed in, let me put that comment back on. I've only stayed in share house Tokyo. We had very thin foam mattresses. If you're on the cheap end, then yes, you'll just have a thin foam mattress that is on the floor. If I'm in a really cheap traditional Japanese style hotel, I'll put 2 of them down. I'll put 2 of them down because they're too thin. Franco says, do Japanese actually use Japanese style rooms? Yeah, yes, kind of. Here's my yes, kind of. I think for like a traditional like business kind of trip, like for the business people that are coming to Tokyo, the Western style rooms are just more efficient. Where the Japanese like the Japanese style rooms tends to be less in Tokyo and more in the countryside, particularly at a onsen hotel, like a hot spring hotel. And where the Japanese style rooms really become functional is when you're with a big family, like, or a big group. Maybe you're with like 8 or 10 people and you want those 8 or 10 people to all sleep in one room. Really hard if you have beds that take up the whole room all the time. And so these rooms that have tatami mats and tables that you bring in, and then you replace the tables with the futons to sleep on, work a lot better when you have a really big group. Okay. Points Traveler says, do you find the American chain hotels in London and Tokyo to be overpriced? Yes, absolutely. They're absolutely overpriced. If you want to save money in either city, don't book the Marriotts, the Hyatts, or the Hiltons. Book the local chains because they're like half the price of the big international chains. That being said, there is a certain set of service and consistency that comes by booking the Marriotts and the Hyatts and the Hiltons. So, to each their own. Size and space. Rooms can be small in both cities, and this might be counterintuitive, and it might not be what you're thinking because you've probably famously heard that Tokyo hotel rooms are small. You've heard of the capsule hotels and things like that. I'm here to tell you, I feel like, as someone who's been to both cities a lot, hotel rooms in central London, on average, smaller than hotel rooms in Tokyo. Why? Hotels in London, on average, are also much older. They're in, maybe the hotel itself isn't older, but they're in older buildings that have smaller rooms. They can't build as much. Tokyo has many more newer, modern, big high-rise hotels where they can build big rooms. There are some very small hotel rooms in Tokyo, for sure. But we've had much more comfort staying in Tokyo hotels than we have in London hotels. And then price, this might surprise you too, Tokyo hotel rooms significantly cheaper than London. I feel like if I'm measuring apples to apples for like the same level of newness and size of room and service, in Tokyo, half the price of what I'd be paying in London for like similar service. And on the note of service, in Tokyo, Japanese hospitality, renowned for impeccable service, staff going the extra mile to make sure you're happy, though they are sticklers for check-in and check-out times. If check-in time is 3 at your hotel in Tokyo, don't expect to get there at 2:55 and have them check you in early. They'll be like, can you wait 5 minutes? And same thing for checkout time. If you're like, hey, can I get a late checkout? You're like, what's checkout time? They're like 11. They're like, can I get a late checkout? Sure, 11:15. How's that work for you? I meant something like 4 o'clock. No, you got to get out. You got to get out. Because we told somebody else they'll be able to get in the room at 3. And they might get here at 2:55. And at 3 o'clock, that room is absolutely going to be ready for them. Okay. I want to go on to hotel breakfast, which is number 8, but I want to hit a couple comments because these are good comments. Points Traveler says, if you have hotel reward status in Tokyo, it's a lot more valuable than the USA. Better upgrades for sure. For sure. So this is the pro and the con, where if you stay at the Marriott or the Hilton or the Hyatt, it might be more expensive than the local chain, the local Japanese chain. But if you have status with those hotels, the upgrades that you'll get and the breakfast that you'll get and things like that could absolutely be worth the difference in price that you pay. Because if your status means that you're going to get a free breakfast at the, the Marriott, even the Courtyard Marriott by Tokyo Station, if you're a Marriott Elite member, you get this really good breakfast in the restaurant. It's a really good breakfast. If you had to pay for it, it's maybe $30. And if you got 2 people, $60. Hey, maybe it's worth that extra price. Corbin says, how's your luck with Hyatt room upgrades in Tokyo? Not great. But then again, we tend to go during busy times, things like that. I also tend to book points when I book the Hyatt hotels. Like when we've stayed at the Andaz and the Hyatt Centric in Ginza, we've stayed there a couple times. It was always on points, and so we always got the room, but it was a good room, so I didn't complain about the base room that we got. Okay, so on to breakfast, number 8. In particular, hotel breakfast, because you're probably staying at hotels. How are they different? In London, this is a typical hotel breakfast in London, a full English breakfast. What's a full English breakfast? Well, it's definitely got the staple of eggs, but then it will also have things like beans and tomatoes and mushrooms, and hash browns and bacon. Bacon that's a bit more like ham than American bacon, and then sausage. If you're having a real full English breakfast, then some sort of bread, pastries, and perhaps black pudding, which is a pudding made of blood. It's not really pudding, but it's this thing that's made of blood, which if it's your first time, you might pass on. You might pass on that. But that's the interesting culture experience of breakfast in London. You need to get a full English breakfast at least once. How does that compare to a breakfast in Tokyo? Well, Tokyo hotels, the big ones, will often have 2 different types of breakfast offerings. They will often have a Japanese breakfast, and then they will have a Western breakfast. If you opt for the Japanese breakfast, it often looks something like this. This is a Japanese breakfast at a fairly high-end hotel, high-end breakfast restaurant, so it's got lots of different things. But what you will notice on this plate of food, you will notice rice, you will notice soup, and you will notice some kind of fish. A very typical Japanese breakfast. If you want the culture experience, go for the Japanese breakfast. If you want the comfortable experience, go for the Western breakfast. Western breakfasts typically will be served buffet style. So this is the Western breakfast at the ANA Intercontinental Hotel in Tokyo. A fantastic breakfast buffet. Back on this, the Japanese breakfasts are typically served plated, like it generally comes out like that. Generally comes out on a tray. The Western breakfast, they tend to have you go forage for yourself in the buffet. Okay. Now let's talk about convenience stores and markets, because I think this is a big part of traveling someplace. Is how easy is it to get snacks and drinks and this and that. And Tokyo, they are legendary for their amazing convenience stores that you will often hear referred to as konbini. Convenience stores in Japan. Names like Family Mart, 7-Eleven, and Lawson Station are the big convenience stores in Tokyo, and they're everywhere. And they're clean, and they have good food. They have food that's being delivered, fresh food that's being delivered multiple times a day. Amazing customer service. Supermarkets in Tokyo, generally quite expensive. This is where you've also heard of the legendary $100 watermelon and the $10 strawberries. So you're probably not going to be doing a ton of shopping at the supermarkets for food. You'll probably be doing a lot of your shopping at the convenience stores. Supermarkets outside of Tokyo are reasonable. Don Quixote often has some pretty good supermarkets. So does Aeon. But in Tokyo, generally the supermarkets are in the basement level of department stores, and you pay a pretty penny for Tokyo supermarkets. London, they have a fairly extensive set of grocery stores and convenience stores in the city compared to a lot of their cities. Like if you go to Paris, it's really hard to find a lot of convenience stores or grocery stores in the city center, but London has a lot of places that you can get grocery type food that's often convenient type chains of the bigger chains. So they've got like Sainsbury's, they've got Marks and Spencer's, they've got Tesco, and then they all have their like convenience store equivalent for the city. And again, compared to Paris, could be pretty good, but compared to Tokyo, not very good. Like the convenience stores in London, much more run down, typically all like a self-checkout type experience that I've often found really long lines for, and less fresh and delicious food, much more like prepackaged foods that are shelf-stable for a long time compared to the Japanese convenience stores. Franco says, I can live only eating onigiris in 7-Eleven, which are, you call them rice balls, maybe? They got like rice, and they've got usually some seaweed wrap, and then some filling on the inside. Could be seafood, could be something else too. Could be meat. Okay. Points Traveler says, I rarely need cash in Tokyo, just use card. Absolutely, yes. I do not have that as a number, but I feel like both cities are pretty card friendly, though Tokyo, definitely more times you'll need cash. And the times that you will need cash, I feel like in Tokyo, there are maybe some of like the small street vendors, or at some of the like ramen restaurants where like you have to order at a vending machine. In that case, you need cash. If you are loading your transit card, like your Suica card, and you're not using the iPhone app or something like that, then you need cash to load those at the machines. Okay, let's go on to the cultural experience in the two cities. London. We've talked about this a little bit, so I'm going to go short on this one. London has a very diverse culture that's been influenced by centuries of immigration. I find Londoners to generally be quite friendly and quite chatty, particularly London taxi drivers, cabbies as they're known, the people who drive the black cabs. I often feel like particularly if you're flying in from the airport, like they're your like welcome tour guide to London. But I've often had a lot of good chats with the London cab drivers on my way into the city. Or way around the city. Tokyo is a... where do we get here? I guess this is where I'm going to talk about language, huh? This is where I'm going to talk about language. All right. Tokyo, generally much more monoculture, generally Japanese, with an emphasis on politeness and order and cleanliness. The Japanese are generally more reserved. You likely won't be making a lot of new friends while you're in Tokyo. It's not to say that you can't, but probably not the same way that you might strike up a random conversation in London. And it's not just a language barrier. The Japanese culture doesn't really lend itself to friend for a day the same way that the British culture does. The reason why I put this here was to talk about language. And somebody asked in the chat, do you need to know Japanese to go to Tokyo? And Tokyo is very Westerner, international, English friendly. I think you can absolutely get by in Tokyo without knowing any Japanese. You totally can. Because most things in Tokyo are signed in some form of Japanese and English. And that's the reason why I put this here, to give an example of what some of these Japanese English signage look like. So this was at a hotel that had a Western breakfast and a Japanese breakfast. And you can read the English on there, that there's a Western breakfast restaurant and there's a Japanese breakfast restaurant. And you can see sometimes you're probably not really sure what those times are. And so that's a little bit of the Japanese English experience. Like, it's not perfectly signed in English, but most Japanese people in Tokyo will understand English, so they'll likely understand you. They may not be able to speak back, but if you don't speak Japanese, I would not feel afraid or apprehensive of going to Tokyo. I wouldn't say the same thing about going into the countryside in Japan. That's a whole different ball of wax. But Tokyo, you'll be A-okay. Obviously in London, If English is a primary language of yours, which it probably is if you're watching this video, then much less of a language barrier going to London. Why do I say much less? Why don't I say none? The British English can sometimes be a little hard to understand. Hard to understand if you're not trained on it. And they definitely use different set of words out there. So there can be still some language barriers, though it's a really, really small one. Okay. Let's talk about religion. And not because I think you're going to be converted while you're visiting either of these places as a visitor, but a certain part of visiting a place and experiencing the place is absolutely, whether or not immersing, certainly understanding the religions that are there. So in London, the primary religious apparatus is the Church of England, and there are a lot of churches in London. How many churches? I found a Wikipedia page that just went on and on and on listing all of the churches in London, and it didn't total all of them up. But what it did total up, just to give you a number, here was a statistic that said before the Great Fire of London in 1666, so we're talking like 400 years ago. 400 years ago, the City of London, the 1 square mile that I talked to you about before, the 1 square mile of the City of London had 100 churches. 100 churches in an area of 1 square mile or 2.6 square kilometers. 100 churches. And after that fire, there was a fire. This fire in 1666. 86 of those 100 were destroyed. 51 of them were rebuilt, along with St. Paul's Cathedral. Just to tell you how prevalent the church is in London and how many of them you're absolutely going to see. Now, because there's so many of them, honestly, I feel like attendance in the church has declined over the years. So they are, looking for other ways to use the churches. The churches are looking for other ways to get money into the church, to keep the church going. You will see a lot of cafes in the crypts where like the churches that had a basement, using them as places to serve lunch or serve coffee. You'll also see a lot of churches putting on concerts because they're often kind of like cool, beautiful places to listen to a concert. So do look at churches in London as places that you might be able to get a bite to eat or enjoy some music. And Brooklyn Joe says, is that why they charge so much to enter? Because the attendance has declined? Sure. It's like if there's not a great offering from the people who go there, then they need to collect money some other way to maintain these old buildings. They don't maintain themselves for free. Cara says, I love historical buildings. There's a lot of history in these churches in London. Okay. In Tokyo, it's not going to be about churches. In Tokyo, it's going to be about temples and shrines, incense and offerings. Where in London, yes, many of the churches to go into, you do have to pay some sort of admission fee. In Tokyo, you generally don't have to pay an admission fee to go into the temple or shrine, go in. Usually it's not as much of a building as it is a grounds. But I think that the Japanese people are more giving with their offerings. These, buildings are generally meant to come up to offer a prayer and then offer an offering. Now you might be saying, Chris, you use temple and shrine. What's the difference between a temple and shrine? Because they're not the same thing. Shrines are built to serve the Shinto religion, and shrines are characterized by a torii gate like this at the entrance. One of the iconic symbols of the Japan, torii gate. They're not always red. They can often also just be kind of wood or brown color. But if you see one of these, it typically means it's a shrine to the Shinto religion. Temples are built to serve the Buddhist religion and are characterized by a gate that looks more like this. This is called a Sanmon gate at the entrance. One of the most famous in Tokyo is the Sanmon gate to the Sensoji temple. This is the most famous temple in Tokyo, one of the grandest. And one of the cool things about Sensoji, in addition to the actual temple grounds, there's this really neat walk up to it that has all these different shops and vendors and food, and it's just a really fun, vibrant, colorful place to visit. and doesn't cost you any money to go into. Yes, the churches in London cost you money to go into, cost you no money to go here. And DJT Forever says Asakusa, the neighborhood where Sensoji is, this temple I showed you, is the best part of Tokyo. It's definitely a part of Tokyo that has a lot of character. It's one of the more historic parts of Tokyo. So if you want to experience the little more like older Tokyo rather than the new modern Tokyo, definitely spend some time around here. Okay. Let's talk about safety. We're down to the last two. Number 13, safety. Both London and Tokyo, as far as safe goes, are generally safe cities. I say London is safe, but London is definitely less safe than Tokyo. If you're like, Chris, I want to go to the safest place, it's going to be Tokyo. There is no big city in the world that is safer than Tokyo. Singapore is probably up there too, but I would say Tokyo and Singapore are pretty high on the safety index. What's the issue in London? The issue in London isn't like violence or violent crime. The issue in London is pickpocketing. A lot of pickpockets, a lot of petty theft in London. This sign was inside a pub in London. Inside the pub, they have this sign that says, "Don't be distracted, please watch your belongings," and they have it in a lot of different languages. Because in London, the pickpockets don't just operate out in the street. They go inside restaurants. They steal people's purses, bags, cameras, cell phones. Apparently, there's a lot of cell phone snatching in London where they snatch it out of your hand when you have your phone out on the street. So you do need to be much more aware of that petty theft criminal element in London. In Tokyo, what you need to be aware of is you need to be aware of crime, drinking scams, essentially. A place to be like, come to my bar. Anybody who invites you to their bar on the street, don't go. Because it's generally down 3 levels of a basement, and they tell you it's great. It's the drinks are only 100 yen, $1. The first drink's $1. The second drink's $100. So as long as you're not like, I would say if you're not drinking in Tokyo, then you really don't have to worry about any scams. And Carter says, yes, you especially have to watch out for that in Shinjuku. Shinjuku, the Kabuki-cho neighborhood, that is the height of Tokyo's Scamville. And I was, here's my story about walking down the street in Kabuki-cho. I was by myself. I was shooting a walking tour of Kabuki-cho, but before I started it, I'm scoping out where I'm going to record. Someone comes up to me and he's like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, good. A lot of people, they're not strange to me because a lot of people do that. They're like, do I recognize you? Should I recognize you? Hey, Chris. So I'm used to people coming up to me at this point. Another guy comes up to me. I think nothing of it. Think maybe he recognized me from YouTube. Like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, oh, good. How about you? He's like, good. Then he asked me where I'm from. I'm like, oh, you clearly, okay. You don't know who I am. That's fine. And I'm not saying like you need to know who I am, but I'm like, okay, I've now been to where this conversation is. I'm like, oh, I'm from California. And he's like, pretty girls. Are you looking for pretty girls? I know where you can get some pretty girls. I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the offer. Again, on that note, how even in Japan, one of the safest places in the world, some of the most honest people in the world, there is that other element too. Okay. Number 14, let's talk about the pace. The pace is definitely very different in these two cities. In Tokyo, the Japanese are very punctual. Everything in Tokyo runs on time. The trains run on time. Like by the minute, the train will arrive. If your train comes at 7:03 and you're on the platform at 7:01 and a train arrives, that might not be your train. That might be the train before your train. They really can have trains that come and go that quickly. If you have a restaurant reservation, they may only hold it for 10 minutes. Like if your restaurant reservation is 6 p.m. and you're there at 6:15 and you're like, oh, when was your reservation? 6 o'clock. They probably gave your table away. Because they're like, well, you weren't here then, so somebody else got to eat. You will all see a lot of restaurants or bars that will have time limits to be like, you can eat here, but there's a 2-hour time limit at the table. Speaking of Marriott's, when we stayed at the Marriott in the Mount Fuji area, when we would eat at the breakfast restaurant, they would give us like a little card they would say, put this down on the table to mark that the table, that you're sitting there. So here's your card, go to your table, put this on the table to mark that you're seated there. And on the card, it says, dining limit 60 minutes. Please limit your time eating at the buffet for 60 minutes so that we can give the tables to other people. So very common in Japan for them to be like, okay, time's up, get out, because we need other people to sit here. London, on the other hand, seems to go much, much slower. I'll use this restaurant reservation example. If you reserve a table at a restaurant in London for lunch or dinner, that table is likely yours for the whole meal period. We went to many restaurants. Like, we went to a restaurant like 11:30 a.m. and I'm like, hey, is your table for 3? And they're like, no, all the tables are fully reserved. One table taken, but all of the other tables have signs on them like this with times on them about when those people are going to get there. I'm like, it's like 11:30. That table, they're not going to get here till like 1 o'clock. I'm like, you could seat us, we could eat, and we could be gone before the time that they get there. But clearly the restaurant doesn't seat us because they don't think they're capable of serving us and feeding us and getting us out of there in 90 minutes, because the service in London restaurants much, much slower. Oh, so slow. So slow. Like I averaged it, like in London, I'd say from the time walking into a restaurant to getting food at a table, average of about 30 minutes. It's like how long it would take to get seated, get a menu, place an order, have them cook the food, bring it there. Where in Tokyo, I would say the average for me of that whole thing, seated, get a table, menu, order, food, 10 minutes or less. At the fast restaurants, like that tempura restaurant that I showed you, 5 minutes from the time I walked in the door to the time that food was on my table. As someone who's the parent of a 5-year-old, I really like the Tokyo service much better. I don't feel that I'm being rushed, but people might say that they might feel rushed. They might feel rushed in Tokyo by that level of service and the promptness and this and that, where in London, you get that table for the whole night. They're not rushing you. You arrive, if your reservation's at 18:10, your reservation's 6:10, but you arrive at 6:45, probably not a big deal. Vice versa, your reservation's 6:10 and you arrive at 5 p.m. and you want to get seated, not a big deal. So that table was yours for the whole night. Janelle Travel says, hit that like button if you are enjoying this video, or you have enjoyed it thus far, or you just feel sorry for me and say, Chris, I wish you had some more followers. You know what you can do? You can hit that like button, because if you like it, YouTube will see that as a signal that people like this video and they will share it with more people, and then, boy, you won't have to feel sad for Chris anymore. By the way, don't feel sad for me, really. I think it's amazing that 121 of you are hanging out on the live stream right now, and countless others will be watching it here to the archive.
Fellow explorers, it is now Q&A time. If you've got a question, I've got an answer.
Okay, fellow explorers, those are the differences between London and Tokyo. What questions do you have? I see a few already in the chat. IDK Man says, is Google Wallet safe? Google Wallet's as safe as you are to keep your phone safe and keep your PIN safe. I just told you in London they steal phones a lot, and so if your Google Wallet's the only way you have to pay, be careful of that. Pickpockets can steal your wallet too, but what are the chances that they're going to steal your wallet and your phone both at the same time? I mean, I guess if you have both of them in your purse or your bag, they might, but if you've got them in 2 different places, I think it's good to carry a few different forms of payment just in case you lose one of them. Franco says, Chris, just choose one, London or Tokyo. Ha ha. I mean, I hate to pick favorites. I hate to pick favorites because they're 2 different places. But me in particular, and this probably has a lot to Chris's geography, we can often get really cheap flights to Tokyo, and they often cost a lot more for us to go to London, which is one of the reasons why we often go to Japan so much and go to Europe a lot less. If you live closer to London, then it probably makes sense to go closer to London. We are about equidistant from the 2 of them, but for the reasons of Tokyo being cheaper, faster, prompter, if I had to pick between the 2, I would pick Tokyo. But I'm also somebody who likes the very different cultural experience If I was somebody who didn't, and I was somebody who really wanted something a bit more closer to home, I wasn't seasoned on traveling, I wanted a place where I knew that I could understand the people, I knew they could all understand me, then I would pick London. There we go. Okay. Tony says, how often should I include breaks or lighter activities to keep the trip enjoyable? Tony, I think that's I've got like a whole planning video where I talk about like I don't know, what did I call it? Like how to not be stressed, like how to plan stress-free travel, something like that. But my short answer to that is that when I plan a trip, I generally only plan one main activity that day. Like every day I've got like one main thing that I need to do. Whether that's like go to the Tokyo Skytree or go to the Sensoji Temple. And then the other day is kind of like, well, these are all the other things I'd kind of like to do around it, but I don't wrap myself around the axle on those. And I would say, Tony, if you plan your days that way to be like, I mean, okay, and maybe you can have two main things to do. You're like, I can have a morning thing to do, and then I can have an afternoon or evening thing to do. But by the time your day is stacked up with much more than that, that's when you hiccup, train delay, you want to spend more time with something, that's where it starts to all fall apart. Carton says a lot of Tokyo's charm is just walking around exploring. It sure is. You know, when I talk about like what are some of my best favorite things to do in Tokyo, they absolutely are just go to this neighborhood and just walk around and just be there. And just being there is amazing. IDK Man says, I watch Yellow Productions all the time. He's my favorite. I watch him with my grandson all the time. Awesome. Thank you so much. Grant says, do you need a visa to travel from USA to Japan? The answer is no. You don't need a visa to travel from the USA to Japan or to the UK. They're just show-up destinations for folks with US passports. DJ Tay. I'm going to call you DJ Tay. Can I do that? Says lots of free museums in London. Definitely one of the best parts about London. One of many great parts about London is most of the major museums are free. The British Museum's free. The Natural History Museum's free. So that is pretty nice. Different than Paris, where like you're going to pay to go in all the museums in Paris. So Hum says, would you recommend the hop-on, hop-off buses in either city? They don't seem authentic. No, not really. I wouldn't. My caveat to that is if you legitimately like only have a day, like somehow, I mean, if you're planning a vacation, you'd plan more than a day. But like, let's say work took you to those places and you had a day or you only had a free afternoon. Sure. Go take the hop-on, hop-off bus tour because you only have 4 hours to see the place. We, when we went to London recently, we didn't do a hop-on, hop-off bus tour, but for our daughter, we did a Peppa Pig afternoon tea bus tour. It was a 2.5-hour bus tour around London on a double-decker bus. You know, our daughter could see all of the main sites, the Tower Bridge, the Buckingham Palace, St. Paul's Cathedral. It was a lot of fun because it also had the Peppa Pig narration. For the adults of us, you know, it's kind of like, but again, for the adults in us, we've seen all those sites too. So seeing them again out of the roof of a double-decker bus wasn't that amazing. Points Traveler says, Japan Airlines now offering a luggage transfer service. Take your bag straight from the airport to your hotel. Japanese official. That's super awesome. Japan does have these amazing luggage delivery services, not just for that, like coming off the plane, but they also have them like when you arrive at the airport. Let's say you're going to go to a hot place like Tokyo, and then you're going to go to a snowy place like Hokkaido in the north. Maybe you've got some snow gear you don't want for the first week. There are these luggage delivery services you can go to at the airport, and you can be like, please store my bags at the airport for 1 week, and then in 1 week, deliver it to my hotel in Sapporo that I'm going to need all the snow gear. And like, it'll be there on time, it'll be safe, and it won't cost you that much money. Tony says, how many days would you recommend spending in each city to fully experience the highlights? No less than 5 days. I think you need at least 5 days to really experience the highlights of London and Tokyo. Brooklyn Joe says, would you recommend the Sheraton Miyako Hotel Tokyo or the Courtyard Tokyo Ginza Hotel for location? I have stayed at the Courtyard in Ginza, but I have not stayed at the Sheraton Miyako Hotel. Where is that? Boy, that Sheraton looks like the middle of nowhere to me. So, Ginza. There we go. IDK Man says, I love you, Chris. Good night. Good night, IDK Man. Carter says, also for those visiting Tokyo, I highly recommend getting a temporary SIM card. It's very helpful getting around, and you can get them at the airport. Absolutely. SIM card, eSIM, pocket Wi-Fi. I recommend all of those things. It is absolutely useful to have mobile internet to be able to use Google Maps and know where you're going. Danielle says, are there any markets that are comparable to Borough Market in London, in Tokyo? What I would say, Danielle, comparable. The neighborhood in Tokyo that has the biggest street market or street food is the Tsukiji Outer Market neighborhood. I'll have a walking tour coming up on it in a bit, but lots of. It's not the same, and that it's not like a market. It's more like streets that have been pedestrianized, and then there's lots of stalls that are on these streets. But that would be the one that I would say is closest in spirit to Borough Market. Kathy says, I bought an eSIM this time we went to Tokyo. How did it work, Kathy? Did it work well for you? I hope so. Chris is on the eSIM evangelizing now. Because I think they're so much better than the regular SIMs if your phone does support eSIMs. Chris will only stay at courtyards in Japan. I have only stayed at 2 courtyards in Japan. The courtyard Ginza and the courtyard Tokyo Station. Pierce has just joined in at the end of the live stream. Well, hey, better late than never, Pierce. Franco says, I was so amazed at the staff at Tokyo Airport taking care of the luggage, preventing it from being hit when they got off the plane. They are very, when you see those videos about people throwing luggage off planes, is definitely not how they are in Tokyo. They are definitely very gingerly about getting that luggage down. DJ Tay says the Tesco meal deal. Yes, if you're in London, a big cheap eat at Tesco, one of those supermarket convenience store chains. They have this thing called the Tesco meal deal, which is one of the cheapest things. Kathy says, initially her eSIM wouldn't work, but the second day was fine. Oh, that's a bummer it didn't work on the first day, Kathy. Okay. Han says, what souvenirs do you buy from UK and Japan? UK, buy, what's his name? Paddington. Paddington the bear. The classic stuffed animal from Paddington. I feel like in Japan, it's like food. Like food are the main souvenirs to bring back. Like Japanese snacks and sweets tend to be most of their things. Tony says, do you think countryside is always the best place to be in London or Tokyo? I mean, I like the cities in Japan. I like London too. I like the countryside too. For me personally, countryside in the UK or countryside in Japan, I will take the countryside in Japan over the countryside in the UK. Why? In the UK, everything in the countryside closes so early. Like the shops close so early. Like by 5 o'clock in the countryside, there's nothing to see or do. Where I feel like in Japan, you can find things that are open later. So as a tourist, that's just an easier experience. Now, I will say, medical care for a moment, because I want to give props where they're due. If you need urgent care help, one time my mom had to go to urgent care in Japan. They made sure we had 30,000 yen that we gave them when we came in to make sure we could pay for our treatment. In the UK, when the Curious Princess had a big cut on her finger and we needed to go to minor injuries, as they call it, the hospital, to have them kind of stitch up her finger, no charge. Didn't want money, didn't want insurance information. The UK's national health system covers emergency type procedures for anybody who's there. Doesn't matter where you're from. They don't ask for money. There's no way for them to take money. And I think that is super amazing. So, UK, thank you so much for your amazing healthcare system. DJT Forever says the rest of Japan is totally worth seeing. I agree. It is totally worth seeing. And Meritocratic Mafia says one of the most popular souvenirs to bring back from Tokyo is the Tokyo banana. The Meritocratic Mafia says I found them disgusting. They're like a Tokyo banana. I was actually having this conversation just the other day with some friends of mine. I brought back some Tokyo banana flavored Kit Kats, which Tokyo banana flavor is kind of a ripe banana flavor. And a Tokyo banana is basically like a banana flavored Twinkie. There you go. Okay. Kathy says that I guess the healthcare system same in Australia as the UK. Very cool, Kathy. I've not had to experience it, knock on wood, in Australia. I don't mean that I don't want to. I just haven't. No, I haven't gotten hurt. Nobody I've been with has been hurt. But yes, that is very nice quality. All right, let's do the giveaway.
Yes, it's the time you've been waiting for. It's time for the giveaway.
But before we do the giveaway, this is the last stream of 2024. So everybody who's live, thank you for joining me today. Vlogmas continues. I think I have enough to carry Vlogmas all the way through past Christmas to the end of December. So you can expect new videos every day between now and the new year. Be taking a break on the live streams from now until about mid-January. So I will see you back then. And the question for the giveaway, for the Yellow Productions crew shirt, to give away the Panda and the Princess shirt is in an earlier picture that I showed in the live stream where I was wearing a suit. I was standing in front of a famous Ferris wheel. What is the name of that Ferris wheel? And what is the name of the river that Ferris wheel is next to? If you were the first person to answer that question with the name of the Ferris wheel and the name of the river in the same chat line, you will win that Yellow Productions crew shirt sent to you anywhere in the world. And if you don't get to win one and you want to buy one, you can pick one up at the Yellow Productions shop right here. And if you wonder, Chris, when is the next live stream in mid-January? What's going to be the date? I don't know exactly what the date is going to be yet. But if you sign up for the Yellow Productions update, it's an emailing list. Every time I've set a live stream, I send an announcement out there. Occasionally when I publish some cool new videos, I send an announcement of those too. I promise not to spam you with anything if you do sign up over there, but join your fellow explorers who always know when the next live stream is because they've signed up for the Yellow Productions update.
And now we have a winner chicken dinner.
Okay, winner chicken dinner. Who is the first person to say both? All right. Normani, congratulations. You are the first person to say London Eye and Thames. Because this is the holidays and it is Christmas, we're going to give away 3. So we're going to go down the list. I've got you, Normani. You were the first person to say both. And then second is Points Traveler, and third is Brandon Torres. So congratulations to Normani, Points Traveler, Brandon Torres. All 3 of you, send me an email to chris@yellow-productions.com. You'll find that email in the description. Let me know your address and your size of shirt, and I will get that headed out to you shortly. I'm sure it'll arrive after Christmas, but a late Christmas present that you can enjoy. Well, fellow explorers, as always, pleasure to hang out with you all today. I hope you have a happy holidays. I hope you have a happy new year. I will still continue to see you daily videos for Vlogmas, but the next time I'll be able to interact and talk with you is in the new year. As always, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next video.